When you don't take time to look at it through other people's eyes. Take some time and reflect on what you believe in your soul. Cause that is the key to life. You gotta let the negativity go.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to What the Fox podcast. This is your host, Lindsay Fox. And today we actually do not have Amber Ross here. However, we have a lovely guest speaker who I've known for quite some time. Her name is Brittany Smith. She's joining us from North Carolina. So we are so happy to have you here, Brittany.
Hey.
So just to kind of do a quick introduction about Brittany, we do ask our guest speakers to kind of just give us a rundown of how they would describe themselves. And what I love about Brittany is that, for this particular episode, we are discussing, around this theme of detox and releasing what's no longer serving us. And through that, we're going to be discussing, just how our jobs can affect us. So when I asked Brittany to talk to me about, how would you define who you are and describe yourself to our audience, not one part of, her description really had her, career as her identifier. And I thought that was so cool, by the way.
Intentional.
I love that. I love that because
we are more than what we do to pay the bills. So.
Bingo, baby. I love that. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce you then as a human, a storyteller, truth seeker, free thinker, lover of donuts. I love that. Self-care advocate, writer, and creator of Tea Essence, a Black woman-owned lifestyle and tea brand designed to cultivate and enhance intentional reset, relationship, and release.
Period.
I love that. I love that. And what's funny is that what people don't know about you, what is the career that we, or rather once shared in common that is not on this list?
There's so many.
Oh, that's actually you're right. I mean, I'm sorry. The one that really triggered the burnout. I'm sorry.
Mental health counselor, therapist. I use those interchangeably.
Yeah, well, we talked about this actually in a previous episode where it's like, people might say counselor, therapist, clinician, it's all the same kind of jazz. So, but yes, so Brittany and I, we did not work together in the context of being therapists together, but ironically enough, we met each other in high school and have now come full circle.
Right.
Now I'm like, wait a minute, how many years ago did you?
I know, right?
Yeah, right. Wait a minute, it's definitely been more than a decade. So to learn that she became a therapist, and I did too, we crossed paths and really started to talk about our experiences. And through that, there was definitely this shared, how would you like to describe this? This shared sense of understanding each other and having empathy, right? Around compassion fatigue.
Right. I really felt human when we reconnected, sharing our experiences, because it's like, wow, someone else feels exactly how I'm feeling. So
yes, yeah. It has been a hell of a ride being a therapist during a global pandemic. And so we definitely want to talk about that today because especially with Brittany being a woman of color as well, is that this was not just a global pandemic that you're navigating. This was a global revolution around Black Lives Matters and all the things that were coming up. So that was also a huge piece, which I'm so glad that you're here also willing and open to talk about this experience, because it's an important one that I don't think many people have your level of insight and perspective on as a clinician,
Exactly.
So I guess first things first, just kind of with all of our guest speakers, we do a consult to kind of get a timeline of things and kind of where that change process evolved and took place. And I would love to connect with you kind of where your story begins in this process, where you had been working as a therapist, or you had been in grad school and was kind of transitioning with your provisional license or what have you, but you had an interest in joining the Peace Corps. Is that right?
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
and I definitely I love speaking about this again because it is a perspective that a lot of people don't hear about.
Yeah.
And so I moved from Texas to North Carolina after I finished grad school and stayed with my mom for about 10 months. During that course of time is when I made the decision to go to Peace Corps. And it's just something that I just wanted to do as an altruistic thing to do. I love traveling. So why not?
Yes.
You know, I don't have any
Yes.
kids. Like, I'm ready to get out of here.
Perfect timing. I
Exactly.
feel like we should just
And
note like a little disclaimer, just very quickly around this story here.
yeah,
This is so Brittany is sharing her unique experience. This is in no way a reflection of the entire organization. This is in no way trying to shame or dissuade people from joining the Peace Corps. This is just one person sharing their personal experience. Um, and needless to say, I think it's a valid experience that we kind of hash out and discuss.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean,
Sorry
the
to say this.
process applying was pretty easy for the most part, like getting in all the things that you needed for the application. And then after you receive a response about getting approved, that's when you start your clearance. So I had to get a vaccination. I had to get the yellow fever vaccination to go. I was serving in South Africa. So they had that recommendation. I had to get through medical clearance. I had to go to the doctor. I had to go to the dentist. And then the biggest clearance was kind of like they included it in your medical clearance, but it was kind of like a psychological type of assessment.
Right, like an eval.
Right,
Basically, like
exactly,
anything, like when people kind of join the military, or if you had a loved
exactly,
one join the military, kind of associate in your brain the same kind of timeline of events of like all the checks and balances that have to be done in order to join the
exactly.
military. It's a very similar process with the Peace
Yep,
Corps.
exactly similar. And throughout that process, with my medical clearance, I was informed that they wouldn't be able to medically clear me because I had seen a therapist within a year of the time I was supposed to depart.
Full
Um,
stop.
yeah,
What?
what?
What? I'm sorry. I'm
Exactly.
sorry. What?
Yes, exactly.
Well, what
Yeah.
is this kind of, I mean, so like when we even hear that, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? What does that mean to your application? Does that mean you can't join the Peace Corps because of that? Or does it mean that your
Yeah,
application's
you
on to like on hold?
right. At first, it was an application on hold because I had to do an appeals process. So I had to go through an entire appeals process, getting references from like 5 different people. I had to get another like psychological like evaluation and assessment and written up. I had to get the notes from my last therapist just to prove to them
Wow.
that I was stable enough to serve abroad for 2 years with Peace Corps.
And
So they
just
kept
so our
on.
audience, oh, I'm so sorry to
No, you're good.
interrupt, but just to understand here, right? So you were actively, you were a therapist, you had your credentials, and
All
just so
that.
people, our audience understands, in graduate school, this is actually becoming a more common practice for grad students who are entering the world of mental health, where there is a requirement for you to at least have your own therapist or experience therapy at least once so you can understand the experience.
Right.
This is becoming a little bit, it's not on all grad schools, but I mean in general, like it's becoming more popular of a thing because, they're understanding you need to kind of like know what it feels like if you're going to become a therapist, right?
Exactly.
So in your world, and I can't speak to an organization about this, right? I don't know where the Peace Corps stands for this, but even in this context, right? Like what if you just had a therapist because that was a requirement as part of grad school and it was a good fit for you, so you continued on with seeing a therapist. So now you're
Exactly.
essentially feeling like punished for it.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it felt like. And then it was almost like, it's like, I am a therapist. So, like, what do you mean I'm not stable? And they didn't use those exact words. It was just simply, you've seen a therapist within the past year, we can't medically clear you. And they pushed my date back twice while I was going through this appeals process, while I was submitting documents to them. And then for them to tell me maybe a few months later that they couldn't medically clear me at all, even after all the appeals stuff. So that was very disappointing because I know that I would have
Mhm.
brought extreme value to
Absolutely.
the program that I had applied for. And it was just it's just like, I know that I'm not the only person that's also in this situation, you
Right.
know?
Well, Full disclosure, I also wanted to join the Peace Corps. This was long before grad school, but for medical reasons at that time, I did not qualify, and so I was like, "Wow!" But honestly, what I learned through that experience myself is the fact that it is like any little nuanced thing can
Yep.
totally set off your application. So,
Correct.
FYI to those who are listening. So
Disclose what you wish to disclose, just knowing that information,
that is,
essentially.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah,
But in so many ways, though, I do think your experience through that really did reinforce a lot of stigmas around mental health, where,
absolutely.
it would probably make an applicant say, well, let's see, through HIPAA, I can choose what I want to disclose or not. Maybe I'm not going to disclose my mental
Right.
health history or what have you, so that I can submit this application or have a chance. And it's like, man, that's, we don't want to teach people to feel like they have to, keep that part of themselves quiet in
Exactly.
order to like serve others either.
Exactly. Exactly.
And don't get me wrong, like I understand there's rules for why these things exist, but it's just something to kind of be mindful of the fact that this is
Yeah.
still very much a thing.
Yeah. And I think it was also interesting that a lot of the communication that I had back and forth was with a nurse, like a registered nurse. So, I mean, I even, because I was trying to go up to the higher ups and everything about this because I was really it just wasn't settling with me.
Mhm.
I'm like, is there like a psychological, like a doctor or someone else that can review my documentation that I submitted for this appeal? And it was like, you have like a nurse who, and it's no shade to nurses, but you don't have that clinical experience to really make those type of decisions to determine, I can't go to Peace Corps because I've seen a therapist within the past year. So that was just very, very interesting. I'm like, medical clearance wise, for the physical stuff, sure. But a nurse for
Right.
the clinical psychological things is, I don't know.
Right. So maybe if it was perhaps like a psychiatric nurse or
Right.
a clinical social worker or a
Right.
psychologist or psychiatrist, yeah, I definitely can see where that can also feel kind of like you're feeling like your voice isn't being heard or really
Right.
seen.
Right. Because
Um,
all they're doing is kind of checking off. To me, it felt like not really considering context, but really just you've seen a therapist within the past year, so nope, you can't go, kind of thing.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
now here goes your eat, pray, love moment, right? It kind of got shot. So now you
It did.
can't join the Peace Corps.
Right.
So like, now what? Now what? What goes on after this moment of where you're kind of like getting hit with this reality of like, okay, I guess I
Yeah.
can't do this.
Right. It took me maybe like a month or so to just accept the reality that I'm no longer, because by that time I had already told people, I'm going because I was cleared on everything else. I'm like, surely, my appeal will be fine. And then it wasn't. So it was just kind of like breaking that down and taking me a month to kind of just rebuild with that. And then I ended up moving to Charlotte in that time frame, and then took on a intensive in-home therapy job here full-time, working with some kids. And then I was doing EAP counseling overnight on the weekends. So that's kind of what I started doing when I first moved to Charlotte, and then started burning out kind of
Well,
towards the yeah, the
well,
beginning of the
let's
ending.
let's let people understand what this means. So like I'm
Right.
hearing you and I'm like, yeah, that's like a recipe
Mm-hmm.
for
Oh
disaster. I can
yeah.
see why you burn out real fast. So just to help our audience understand what this means, um, well, the EAP counseling is like the employee assistant kind of
Yes.
program if other employees are wanting to connect with a
Right.
therapist or coming and at this in this particular company, this was a global
Right.
brand. Is that correct? We will
Right.
not say the name of the company,
Right.
but it was a global brand. So there were clients or employees reaching out from all walks of life, all parts of the world. Is that
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so here you are working the overnight shift, which, by the way, God bless, I do not know how you were able to do that.
I loved it for the time.
Girl, don't know how you did it. Um, so there, you were doing that in the overnights, but then you mentioned that you also took on an in-home therapy role as a
Yes.
clinician.
Yep.
So for those of the audience that is not familiar, what we call this IHT is, and I also actively do IHT work presently as a clinician. So Brittany used to do this. Um, I think it is fair to say the IHT, you're like already laughing. You're like, I know. Yeah.
Right.
The IHT role, in many ways is like a recipe for burnout in of
It is.
itself.
Yep,
You
for
want to say
sure.
a little bit more about why that could be, Brittany?
Yeah, I mean, with intensive in-home therapy, you're really that in between service between keeping them in the home versus finding them placement elsewhere because their mental health issues are that significant. So there were some kids that I was seeing maybe 2 or 3 days a week doing an hour of therapy each. And then they also had the two technicians that I worked with. They would, take them out and doing things with them too. So, and then you're also on call
Yep.
24/7.
24/7. That's
And I
right.
was the team lead for that program. So even if one of the technicians like went out on an on-call situation, usually they're calling me as the first point of contact to let me know what's
That's
going on and
right.
then consulting with me based on
Mhm.
whatever their treatment plans were. So it just got to be at a point where I'm like, I'm missing hours on my second job because I'm having to, tend to my kids with the intensive
That's
in-home
right.
therapy and, all of their crises, which
Right.
happened weekly. There was
Often.
always
Yes, all
something
the time.
all the
Yep.
time.
I hear
Yeah.
you. I'm in the same boat. I know this is your old boat. The ship has
Yeah.
sailed for you. But
Yes.
you have said goodbye. But I
Hmm.
definitely can relate to your experience in that sense. And it can be a lot. It's a lot
Yeah.
to juggle. And I think especially as I think about you being on the overnight as well during the weekends, that is just like too much. I cannot
Yeah.
even fathom that.
Right.
But in just, in-home therapy is also, it's like a level of care where you're focused on a child. So just to clarify here, it is like children and families that you're working with. So you're
Right.
working with children and the caregivers, and it's a lot. I mean, it's a
It
lot.
is.
So at this stage, you're hitting this level of burnout of just like, holy cow.
Right.
Um, where you wanted to have your eat, pray, love moment. You can't
Hmm.
do that. So now you've transitioned into this in-home therapy role and coupled with this EAP role. And if I remember your timeline correctly, it is like soon thereafter this pandemic hits. Is that right?
Exactly. I quit the intensive in-home therapy job and decided to just do the EAP counseling full time, just keep that one job. And that was
Okay.
around maybe March or April of 2020. And then that's when we went on lockdown. I can't remember the exact month. Was it like maybe February, March, somewhere around that time? So we're kind of getting into the beginnings of like the lockdown where the pandemic is starting to pick up. A lot of the police killings, protests, all that going on. So we're probably at now like the spring, summer of 2020, where it was just like, what is happening? What is happening?
Yes. And so, I mean, just like I feel like we need to like take pause and have a level of mindfulness here.
Yeah.
So we're gonna touch on this in a second, but I feel as I just watched you have a sip of your tea here,
Had to.
I'm just I'm just like, I can really feel why you went into this tea business. Um,
Because this
so
is what I
just
would be
like
doing on the phones, drinking my tea to just bring myself, center myself.
yes, like as a way of mindfulness of just kind of
Yes,
right. So you're actually having maybe your detox tea as you're trying to like
exactly.
recenter yourself. So, in case I did not make this clear in the intro, Brittany owns her own tea business and was once a therapist. So, I feel like that's where this segue here is going to be pretty interesting, just in terms of like how tea has become a part of like her way of like really embracing mindfulness in a day to day way, and kind of releasing what no longer serves you. And so now with
Exactly.
you having like detox tea and stuff like that, it's so
Hmm.
appropriate.
Yes.
Um, Also, just like a sneak peek, we are going to be offering a discount code at the end of this episode. So if you guys are still with us, you're doing great. Hang in till the
Right.
end of the episode, and we'll give you guys a little sneak peek into some promo codes to get a discount on both Brittany's tea and my life coaching services. So I apologize. Now we can time in right back. So the pandemic has hit. So where are we now, Brittany?
Yeah, so we're in June of 2020. I'm still doing overnights, but I'm doing just the EAP counseling full time. Um, we received an email from one of the clinical staff with all of the protests going on and everything. That person made a recommendation for
Oh boy.
anyone who calls in. Oh, are we pausing? Oh.
I just honestly,
Oh.
I'm sorry. I just realized where you were going with this, and I'm just
Oh.
like, I just had this oh shit moment because I know what you're about to say.
Oh.
Um, I'm sorry. I almost feel like this needs like a drum roll. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Um, right, right.
And click my
It's
nails.
like it's like I'm sorry. All right. So you get this email, as in not just you, right?
Every clinician that it was like, I don't know how many, like 150 counselors globally, but they sent it to
Globally.
everyone.
Let's
Yeah.
emphasize this, guys. This is a global company. Global company. This was not just it's a small clinic. All
No.
right. And so what did this email say, Brittany?
Yeah, I mean, long story short, it prompted for anytime we had any clients calling in, what we called them participants, anytime they called in, and if they were requesting a counselor of color, to message a counselor of color, see if they're available to take the call, and then if not, say that a counselor of color will give them a call back. And for me, I couldn't think of the worst timing for an email like that to be sent, without talking to your counselors of color to begin with, to see if we were in a space or we had the capacity to step up and take those calls for those who were, requesting a counselor of color. That was their solution, though, in that moment.
Mind blown.
Yeah.
Mind blown.
Mm-hmm.
When you told me this, I was like, wait,
Yeah.
what? Say what?
Exactly.
Without even consulting,
Yep.
clinicians around this. Because just in all fairness here, especially being a clinician of color in the United States, when all this stuff is hitting about George Floyd,
Exactly.
and
Yep.
we are seeing protests, we are seeing just like all kinds of stuff going down here in the US. And you were not a part of this conversation one bit.
No, it was just an email. And then of course I responded to the email. I know I wasn't the only clinician that responded to it. And then, she sent another email to take back what she said, and then proposed, something a little bit healthier for everyone first.
Oh, but let's hear what was the healthier option? What was the
I
healthier
mean, there
option?
really wasn't a healthier option. It was just like, maybe asking first. But by then it was already like the burden was already placed on us to begin with, because either way, eventually, if someone was requesting a counselor of color, which is totally fine, because I don't think that anybody should not have a
Sure.
counselor. But it just didn't take into consideration.
Yeah, this
I
is no
think,
shame on the people requesting
no,
it, right?
not at
I mean,
all. Not at all. Not at
no,
all.
this is more of a, I think what we're acknowledging here is just the fact that even within helping professions, how the helpers can be overlooked in terms of the helper's need.
Absolutely.
When this is where that conversation is very critical around self-care and where this burnout can really hit, because
Right.
we are so hyper focused on attending to everyone else's needs that the helper gets lost in the shuffle.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
especially the minorities
Mm-hmm.
in this situation where y'all
Right.
are also trying to navigate emotionally what you are experiencing in the midst of this revolution
Exactly.
that's going down.
Exactly. Struggle times, I mean, part of that email as a solution was, telling us, do those self-care things, go take a walk during your break. But even with that, it just wasn't a work structure that was really set up for you to take the break that you really needed.
Mhm.
I worked an 8-hour shift, but my lunch break was scheduled. They tell you when to go to lunch. They would schedule my lunch break 3 hours after I started. So after I come back from my lunch, I now have to put in the work, and grind for the next 5 hours of my shift, when I really could have used a break maybe 5 hours into my shift instead of the first three, when I really haven't done anything, significant at that time.
Right, because of the hours you
So
were working.
exactly. And then you only get a 30-minute lunch anyway. So that kind of just comes and goes. And then, I mean, if you're taking too many breaks, they'll say something, so I feel like their
Mhm.
solution email with the self-care piece and asking for permission really didn't help. It really wasn't a solution in the
Right,
end.
because I think the word that we need to use to label this is the fact that in this moment, especially clinicians of color, there was a lot of vicarious trauma going on.
Absolutely. And it was something that none of us have ever experienced. It's not something that we learned in grad school. There was nothing in the textbook, nothing on any exams to really prepare you for this type of vicarious trauma, because it's happening, live, as we
Yep.
speak.
So one of the other, healthier options that I was kind of like alluding to earlier when I said, "What was a healthier option, Brittany?"
To
Is
quit.
because oh gosh. Well, okay, we haven't got there yet,
Right.
but that is actually hilarious. That is a burnt out, that is an extra crispy burnt out therapist talking right there. Oh, that's funny. I was actually going to allude to the fact that, as a result of, your speaking out, it then became like, oh, okay. I'm just kind of like
Yeah.
paraphrasing here on behalf of the unnamed company here, but like, oh, okay, we know, let's do a diversity and inclusion training, and we'll put all the people of color in charge of running this. Is that
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah. So there was, I mean, the diversity inclusion committee. I don't know if that existed prior to all of this, which is fine because I feel like a lot of companies implemented this diversity inclusion motive, newly with everything going on the past year plus. But yeah, so I got a message on Microsoft Teams asking, hey, Brittany, can you facilitate this global forum, to help, employees navigate how, everybody's feeling? And it's just like, well, what about how I'm feeling? Why can't someone else do it? And then, you don't want to be seen as having to be the spokesperson for every single Black counselor in
That's
this
right.
organization. And then at the same time, I felt like, well, who else would do it? So you kind of have to put yourself, do what you can to muster up the energy and the capacity to facilitate that forum. So that ended up being, the case for me. It was just like, I don't want to do this, but I can't think of any other counselor of color that would be able to and do it in a way that it needs, that I would, that it needs to be done. So
Right. And I think I love how you phrase this, because this is, again, a perspective I think our audience needs to really understand if you are not a person of color,
yeah,
is that hearing you say, I had to muster up the energy to talk about this, to educate people on these things that should be common knowledge.
right,
Um, you had to muster up that energy, right? So as
yeah,
clinicians across the board, right, just to keep in perspective, everyone, right, I'm pretty sure every stay-at-home mom, teacher, everyone can relate to the fact that there's some burnout going down just because of the pandemic, regardless of color. Okay,
right,
fair? Like, not a
yeah.
race issue. Just everyone's burnt
Exactly.
out from the
Everyone had a very
pandemic.
hard time with that adjustment because it's something that none of us ever experienced. So completely
Right.
there.
So, on top of already feeling burnt out, it was going to clinicians of color and saying, hey, do this thing and speak on behalf of all Black voices. And something that you had said to me during the consult, which I really appreciated you saying, is like, well, not all Black experiences are the same.
Correct.
Can you
Exactly.
say more about that piece?
Absolutely. As part of that global forum, there was another counselor of color that brought that up. A lot of the time, the assumption is, when someone requests a counselor of color, that we can identify with, that exact same Black experience, but that is not always true. And then, like, for that perspective of that counselor of color that shared her perspective, she's like, I grew up in a very like a kind of like a suburban town. Like, she doesn't have any like connections with like anything that people would identify as like a typical Black experience.
Mm-hmm.
She went to like a predominantly white school, whereas for me, like, I went to a historically Black college. Shout out to Winston-Salem State University.
Woo woo.
Right. I have on their sweatshirt today. But
Yeah, you
anyway,
do.
yes. But yeah, and so even with her saying just that right there, those are two completely different, even in our collegiate experiences, two different experiences, to where if someone shared something about, how I went to this historically Black college and like I had this going on, she wouldn't be able to relate to that. She can still hear you all the same as any counselor would. But can she say, what, I know exactly what that feels like? No, because she doesn't relate to that experience, even though she's Black. So
That's right. That's right. I appreciate you touching on that, because I don't think
yeah,
that's a topic that, honestly, people even feel comfortable asking about. And
right,
if you're not, whenever you're not a person of color, maybe it's not even something they're thinking about, number
right,
one, and even know to ask about. But I think that it's a good perspective to put on the table for discussion, you know?
It definitely is.
Um,
And then also for, counselors that aren't counselors of color, we're trained to be able to, empathize, understand, and gain an understanding of whatever experiences anyone has from any walk of life. So I also want to encourage like advocates, and allies that are counselors that are not counselors of color, that you still have the competency to still assist clients of color, even if you don't, relate to their exact walk of life and story.
Yes, yes. I love that you brought
Yeah.
that point up. That is a very valuable point because
Yeah.
it shouldn't, the energy, right? The onus of education and putting it out there in the world
Exactly.
should not be on the people of color to educate everybody.
Exactly.
Especially when these times, especially, y'all are still, navigating so much of what's going on right now where it's like you got to hold space for yourself and
Right.
you've got brothers and cousins, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's another piece of all of that. So
Oh
it's like you're thinking
yeah.
about your family and your own wellness and it's just, so definitely thinking about the vicarious trauma and just needing to hold space for yourself, I think is key. But also just in that experience of, I remember you kind of mentioning that your colleagues really didn't think this forum was really necessary as a
For some
whole.
of them, yeah. And then, I mean, there are people that just didn't participate at all. And it was completely optional. There wasn't a large turnout as I would have imagined, because you still have people that were tired of talking about everything that was going on. And, we respect that. But I think for the group that we had, it was maybe like 15 to 20 people in that forum. For the most part, everyone was pretty open. It was a pretty good discussion, no matter what end of the spectrum people were on in that
Sure.
conversation.
Which is great,
Mhm.
it's great. But in the same breath, I feel like the position that you were put in was a challenging one and one that you've identified as like a pivotal piece of your story that
Right.
really ultimately contributed to significant burnout.
Exactly.
So what happened after this phase, I guess we can say, this
Yeah.
part of your
Yeah.
story?
So I switched from, I got through the summer of 2020 and I thought that switching from night shift to day shift, so I ended up changing from overnights to just a Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 2:30. I thought that that would be the solution to the burnout, but it wasn't. Still the same work, but just a different time of the day. And I got to the point of maybe like October of last year where I just started to think to myself, I can't keep on carrying this. Like whatever this is that I'm feeling, it was just
Mhm.
this heaviness.
The
I
weight
was
of the
very,
world.
yeah, like literally. And I
Mhm.
was not happy. I really noticed a lot of changes in just the way I communicated with people, with my partner. He would always tell me, you're negative all the time, or I'm not pleasant to be
Mm.
around sometimes. My mom would FaceTime me. I would not feel like I would answer the FaceTime, but like not be on video or
Right, which is
just,
so not your
it's
personality
not.
too. So I
My
think
mom
what
would
you're
always,
labeling are like these are like great signs and symptoms
yes.
of burnout that could turn clinical if you're not watching out.
Exactly. And a lot of isolation.
Mm,
I mean, I do keep to myself for the most part anyways, but it was kind of it was over the top. Like I would turn my phone off completely in the evenings, like after work. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I changed my
yeah,
number and then like to get rid of people, to kind of like not even be bothered with
yeah,
anybody, just not
yeah.
myself. And then, I mean, I would say, one of my biggest things that I noticed was I would drink a lot more than I usually would. I was having like a glass of wine often,
Which,
and that turned
by the
into like,
way, during the pandemic, right? Not to interrupt here, but I mean, during the
yes,
pandemic, I feel like the wine thing and drinking became such a, initially
yes,
like a ha ha ha, like, huh, we're all in isolation, let's just get drunk. But it's like, frankly, we did see, and we have seen statistically,
yes,
drug use, alcohol use, domestic violence,
increase,
child abuse, it has all skyrocketed during the
yes,
pandemic.
yes,
So, even the
exactly,
helpers, right? We are all susceptible to this addiction and depression, all this stuff. It does not
exactly.
discriminate.
Nope,
Nope.
at
We're all
all. And those,
susceptible.
yep, and those glasses of wine were turning into like bottles of wine, and it was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. I just can't.
Mhm.
And so I started
Mhm.
applying to jobs, and probably like November of last year. and started that job. That was a job in and of itself, applying for new jobs. And I mean, I thought about switching careers. I tried to get into HR, education, and dead ends everywhere. I know for sure I applied to at least 100 to 150 jobs within like 4 to 6 months. There was a period of time where I wasn't hearing back from anyone. That takes a toll on you mentally, because I'm just oh my goodness, like there's no way out of this.
I mean, well, yeah, because it's like, think about it, right? You have a master's degree, you've done all the things that society says you should do in order to qualify for all the things, and now you're being told you don't qualify for anything other than being a therapist.
Exactly.
And so it feels so defeating when you get yourself in that space. And honestly, I love that you have the courage to talk about this, because I do believe, as we look at unemployment numbers today, and as we look at how many people, the job market, right? There's so many people. I don't know about you, but I know for me, especially in the world of being, still working as a clinician, and also even in the coaching realm, is like hearing people say like, it is so hard to get a job.
It is.
Yet you're seeing everywhere, everyone's saying, oh, we can't find people to hire. We can't find people to hire. So there's obviously a significant disconnect going on that no one's really fully addressing or understands how to address at this stage. There's a big disconnect, because you've got so many credentials, yet just like even trying to apply to HR jobs, I feel you on that. It's like who you know in order to get your foot in the door.
And even with that, I had a college friend that had been working in HR for 10 years. He like hand delivered my resume to a lady in HR for this HR generalist position. I went for an interview. What it really wasn't an interview, I guess, it was just a conversation, because it didn't matter how good I was at marketing my transferable skills from 10 years in mental health to HR, which is still dealing with people essentially. Like
Absolutely.
It's not,
brain not to mention you were doing EAP. I mean,
exactly.
That's a huge
that
part.
was like my lead way into, into the conversation. But even with that, it was still like, well, this is a great conversation. This is a great interview. We are so impressed with your skills and background, but we're looking for someone who has that direct experience in HR already. And it was like, this is an entry-level HR position to begin with that only required a bachelor's. And even with being overly qualified,
right? A master's degree, 10 years of mental health experience, not good enough for an entry-level HR job.
Yeah, which is crazy. And so like when you say disconnect, I think that is something that also needs to be explored, because it's not so black and white. It's like, oh, go out and apply to a job and you can get it. It's easy to change fields. It's really not. That's not everybody's success story, unfortunately. Because I tried.
It's very hard. I hear you on that, because I too have kind of, I worked in for an international travel company, and then kind of transitioned careers into hotel management. And then I don't know, next thing you know, I was doing other work and ended up, so it's just like, it is hard to reinvent yourself and to, get yourself involved in other entities. But at the end of the day, you hit the nail on the head talking about transferable skills, because that's just it, is that there are so many transferable skills, even within the service industry, that you can apply to so many other things.
Exactly.
But if nobody's willing to give you a chance, what are you supposed to do?
Exactly. You have to stay stuck, in what you've been doing. And I think that is kind of where the pivot
I was about to say, wait a minute, not you though, not you though.
Exactly.
You chose not to stay stuck.
Yeah, it was either you sink or swim, and I'm gonna fly. I'm gonna soar instead. I'm not gonna do either of those options.
Yes.
So that's what it basically boiled down to. So this takes me now to the summer of, I'm just gonna fast forward to like the summer of this year, still applying for jobs.
Okay, of 2021.
2021. So oh wait, 2021. Yes.
Yes, the summer of 2021.
And it's crazy because of course, you're going into a new year and you're still programmed to think it's 2021, 2022 now, right? So, I'm at my birthday, which is the end of June, 2021. I went with my partner. He took me to Vegas for my birthday. And I just remember prior to my leaving for Vegas, I just told myself, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know that I'm leaving this job. And I think on June 23rd, I put in a 1-week notice. I didn't even give my job 2 weeks. I just knew I get back from my trip on June 29th and I'm going to do one more day. That's the end of the pay period. I'm done.
This is
So
the
June,
EAP thing, the
yeah.
EAP
So this
job.
was June 30th,
Yeah,
2021.
so
That was my
this
last day.
you were at the epitome of burn. You were like so
Yeah.
burnt out. This is like the epitome of burnout at
Yeah.
this stage. You had been
Oh yeah.
so done for a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like I made the best decision. I did the exit interview, which was probably one of the most driest exit interviews I've ever experienced in my life. You could tell, you know, my position, like my shift was already sent out to everyone, you know, so you're kind of just, it's a revolving door. They replace you. So what? You're leaving, you're burnt out, boo-hoo, thanks for your service. And that was basically it. So
yeah. So Vegas you
yeah.
go. To Vegas you go.
Exactly. To Vegas I went, and I returned refreshed and happy that I had one day left and that I would be changing. I didn't know what that change was going to look like, but I just knew that this chapter as a mental health counselor, as a licensed clinician, was over for me. And it
Yeah.
was the best decision I could have ever made.
I am so proud of you too, because again, that takes guts. It
Yeah.
takes, and it takes, honestly, I really would say it's like faith over fear more than anything.
Absolutely.
It's more like,
Absolutely.
it's more than just having guts, but it's like truly having faith that like, listen, my journey here has ended and it is
Yes.
time for me to move on to this next chapter of my life. So you really went through, you know, just to kind of recap here,
Mhm.
frankly, an identity crisis of who am I,
Absolutely.
right? Who am I
100%.
without being in a mental health profession? And who am I without being able to get any of these 150 jobs I've applied for? And you just kind of like came out the other side of, you know, quitting your job and had an aha moment or something that came full fledged. So let's touch on that and how that came full circle.
Yeah.
Your
So I've always
epiphany.
loved tea. I mean, you know, when you're going through that identity crisis piece, I didn't know who I was outside of being a counselor, because I thought that that's the only thing I would be doing, because I was so passionate about mental health. And I think that that's probably one of the most disappointing pieces of the story, is that you really have to say goodbye and really grieve the death of, you know, an old self, an old identity as a counselor, to make the room for whatever you're going to be or whoever you're going to be after that. And so I just started kind of just drawing on my interests. I read a really good book called Pivot by Jenny Blake. And there was a chapter in there. There were a lot of like just questions and kind of like workbook type things that prompted you to like ask, you know, your parents or like people that you grew up with, like, what were you into? Or, you know, what were some of your interests? Because you're, you know, going through this identity crisis, redefining who you are. It's like, what do I enjoy? Like, what would I not mind doing every single day now that I'm no longer, you know, counseling? So tea came to mind, because I'm like, this is easy. I love tea. I'm definitely a tea enthusiast. I have it all the time. So what can I do with this, you know, that I would be passionate about and, you know, go crazy over? And so that's where Tea Essence was born, that thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that name too, by the way.
Yes, which is very intentional. It comes from the word quiescence, which means a space of just stillness and rest. And then I just replaced the QUI with TEA for tea essence instead of quiescence.
I love that. I had no idea.
Oh
We had
yeah.
not talked about
When I
that.
tell you I'm intentional about every piece of my business, very intentional with everything that I've done.
Wasn't that so? Something I remember you also commenting on is like for New Year's, like at the beginning of every new year, you have
Yes.
one word. What was your word for 2021?
2021 was action. 2021.
Okay,
So it was about
action.
doing. And then 2020 was consistency. And then 2022 is discipline.
Okay, so now we're bringing it forward. It's like you've done the action, you launched your business, and so at this point you really developed it was the business development piece you went, you know, head over heels straight forward to after getting back from Vegas.
Right.
All right. And that has kind of led you to where? I mean, kind of share a little bit more about your business or anything that you would like our listeners to just know about you and your business and how it connects with mental health, because you did not give up your passion.
No. And I think that that's important. And that's very important, because you can do anything to make money out here. But for me, I really want to do something that I know is going to last and it's really going to have an impact. And I didn't want to just sell tea because, again, like anybody can do that. And I am far too unique to just sell teas only. So the type of teas blends that I came
I
up
love
with,
this.
it really started.
That was just like a little like snap moment of I
Yes.
know my worth.
Yes, exactly.
I love
Isn't that
that.
what it's all about? Is really knowing your worth and not stopping where you're at just because like maybe society says you can.
That's right.
But
Don't settle just because it's available. Create
no,
something new and go
exactly.
for
Do
it.
something more and then put your own spin on everything that you do.
Yes.
So my mom, she is a diabetic and she loves tea also. So I love that about my mom. But I chose to do tea blends that were focused on wellness, in part because like my mom, she's like allergic to ginger, but you know, can really use like a healthy tea for herself with her diabetes. And so I just started to do my research, really getting into like herbs and herbalism, seeing, you know, what people like, what people are drinking when it comes to tea. I remember posting a Facebook status actually before I even launched my business, just asking, you know, hey, what type of teas does everyone like? And from that response, it was like, okay, I see what people are drinking.
Yeah.
I see what needs. I mean, I call it tea search instead of research, but I did all this tea search. I mean, statistic wise, I went down a rabbit hole, you know, to find out what are people's needs because I want to keep the focus on community and wellness. And that's how I came up with all of the tea blends that I have. And then as a super treat, I also make herb infused sugar cubes to go with teas.
Oh, I have seen.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's
They
a
look
tea and sugar
divine.
experience. It's a
Your
pairing.
Instagram account is on point, by the
Yeah,
way.
thank
If you want,
you. And
yeah,
all me,
I
all
was gonna say,
me.
do you want to let people know your Instagram
Yes,
handle?
my Instagram is it's at Tea Essence, and that's TEAESCENCE. And you can
I
follow me
love your
on
Instagram
there.
account. Yes, it just everything looks so enticing. I'm
Thank
like, gosh, this
you.
girl's like good at her marketing.
Yeah, it's like my aura, you know, that's what I'm like, if my
Yes.
mind was an Instagram business account, like that's what it would look like when it comes to just like the colors, just the way that I lay everything out.
Yep.
I take all my pictures. I've really gotten into product photography.
Yep.
So
It's
with pivoting as
beautiful.
and like as a segue, you know, when you pivot and you start different things for yourself, you also discover you have other talents that you didn't even know you
Girl,
had.
Jenny
I
Blake
mean,
in that book hooked you up.
yeah, like it really got me because you have to do that type of inner and outer work. So you know
Mhm.
the answers that you're looking for, they're going to be in books. You know, you have to do the reading, you have to do the research,
Yeah.
talking to people, connecting with people that are different than what you're used to, so that you're able to focus and shift, you know,
That's
in your
exactly
career.
right. That's exactly right. I do want to ask you, just kind of as we begin to wrap up here, I would love to know, what is the one big idea that you want our listeners to take away just from, your courage and vulnerability with sharing your story? What is the big thing that you want them to walk away learning or knowing or trusting after this process?
Absolutely. I would say, as a former mental health clinician, just from a humanity standpoint, the best way to take care of others around you is to take care of yourself first, whatever that's going to look like, even if it means quitting a 10-year career that you were so dedicated to. You know, take care of yourself first. And then the second piece I would say is, whatever it is that's on your mind, that's in your heart, on your soul, do it. Just do it. You just have to do it. You have nothing to lose by
Yes.
doing so.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I just feel
That's
your
it.
energy. And it's just like, I
Yes.
love it because you are so re-energized, right? When we go back and you think about like these signs
Yes.
and symptoms of burnout that was turning into depression, and just like knowing that you just weren't feeling it anymore.
No.
But it's like to hear your energy and enthusiasm
Yes.
is just like, yes, I am on the right path. I am where I need to be going. And
And it's a great
frankly,
feeling. It really is.
yes,
It's such a good feeling.
absolutely. And so part of this is like, understanding if you're not going to protect your personal peace, who is, right?
Exactly.
And so that's where that self-care piece, I know some people call it like they think it's so cheesy to talk about self-care, but it's like it is so essential to our functioning as human beings. I don't care what profession you're in or if you're
Right.
working at all. Um, so, with that being said, you have been so gracious and kind in terms of wanting to offer our listeners a little special treat. Do you want to tell them about that?
Yes, so through the month of February, you can enjoy 20% off of any of our products on T-Essence's website. And we'll have a link for that.
Yeah, we'll put that on the
And
show notes for folks.
yes, and then the code will be whatthefox22.
Awesome. I love that. And actually, just to kind of match you on that too, I would be more than happy to offer 20% off for any kind of new clients that would like to come in for life coaching services. So I will also extend that offer through the month of February. So I would love for us to ultimately, one of these days, link up and maybe develop a package of some sort with our clients. I love that.
Yes.
And then just like one little fun fact about you. I just want to like wrap up one little fun fact about you because I know that there's another Instagram account that you have. Do you just want to share this like little tidbit about you before we close?
Yes. So anyone who knows me knows I adore donuts. It does not matter where I am in the world because I have had donuts in other countries. I mean, I went to California on vacation, Portland, it doesn't matter where, but I have a donut blog. So you can follow my donut blog is on Instagram. It's called I'll Bring the Donuts, which I think was really cool because that came from, I went to a Friendsgiving. I went to a Friendsgiving and, when we're having the Friendsgiving, you're assigning who's bringing what. And so I said to my friend and his wife, I'll bring the donuts, and there it is.
And the shoe fits. Shoe fits. I absolutely love that. Yes. Brittany, thank you so much for coming on. It has been so awesome to just connect with you and just to have you just be open, open, honest, authentic. That's what this podcast is all about. And you have just, captured the full essence of it, frankly. So thank you for breaking culture barriers and just being true to who you are to live the life that you deserve to live.
Only way to live it, girl.
That's right, baby. Until next time, guys. Thank you for joining.
And we all sing, everything is gonna be just fine. It's gonna fall into place. The sun is gonna set on your terrible day.